The names that shake the very core of Gielinor. Zuck, Soul-Herited, Verzik Viture. You know the health bars, you know the drop rates, you've memorized the mechanics, and you've died to the same mistake 47 freaking times! But there's something that nobody seems to be asking. While you were grinding those bosses and Gielinor was still at threat, while god factions were waging wars, dragonkin were running amok, and while demons were clawing their way through dimensional rifts, it occurs to you, hey, wait, who was actually running things? It's not the ones with the biggest health bars, or the ones with the most followers, nor the ones dropping the best loot. It was these guys, the ones that seemingly never leave their chairs. They've been pulling the strings since the beginning, and today we're exposing them. Let's begin with one of the most dangerous rooms in Gielinor. It doesn't look dangerous though, it's just a library, right? Well, I'll have you know, the unsuspecting Varrock Palace Library sits inside one of the most powerful human kingdoms on the continent. Kings have ruled from this palace. Wars have been declared from this palace. The finest knights in Mistalin eat breakfast 100 feet from where we're standing right now. And the most powerful person in the building isn't any of them. His name is Reldo. He is the Royal Librarian of Varrock. He doesn't attack you and has absolutely no combat level worth mentioning. He sells you nothing, drops nothing, and if you've never needed him for a quest, there is genuinely no reason you'd ever notice him, which is, I'd argue, the whole point. See, Reldo tells you, if you actually stop and talk to him, that he's happy to share everything he knows with anyone who's interested. He seems to be a generous and kind man, warm even. And then he mentions, completely casually by the way, that he'd probably be here even if it wasn't his job. That he likes it so much working here, and his personal ambition is to one day catalogue every piece of information in every book in this library, so that all may read it. All may read it. These are his words, not of the king or straight out of a royal decree. Reldo has decided independently that he will be the one to determine what information exists in an accessible form, but also what stays buried on a shelf somewhere in the back. Reldo appears to you like a humble librarian, but really he is more like a gatekeeper of secrets and complete histories of Gielinor. And as you go through quests, the bigger that history becomes. For example, Shield of Arav is a classic old school RuneScape quest, the history of one of Varrock's greatest heroes, Arav, and the criminal underworld that grew up around his stolen legacy, runs directly through Reldo. He knows the right book. He chooses to point you, the adventurer, towards it. Just one conversation with Reldo and his decision to lead you to the right answers, and suddenly the survivability of Varrock increases. And as the adventurer reads that book, Reldo is inadvertently signing off on whether that piece of history gets to move forward. During Dragonslayer 2, Reldo produces census records dating back to when Varrock wasn't even called Varrock, but when it was still Avarocca. We are talking 4th Age documentation with family lineages, migration records from people who left Mistalin for Mauritania and vanished from history entirely. He has all of it, somewhere on those shelves, filed by a man who isn't entirely sure which shelf, but knows with complete confidence that it's there. That distinction matters. Reldo isn't some all-knowing powerful being, and he doesn't have the best recall. But what is arguably more useful is that he has spent long enough in this library to know what information exists in a world where most people don't even know what questions to ask. Ask him if he has anything to trade, and he'll tell you he only deals in knowledge. Then he'll laugh it off as a joke, but this isn't really a joke. That's exactly what he deals in. Because here's what the quest log actually shows you when you map it all out. The Imkando dwarves, their destruction during the barbarian invasions, the scattered survivors who kept their heritage secret for generations, Robert the Strong, one of Gielinor's greatest heroes, reincarnated as Bob the Cat, the Dragonkin, an ancient near-immortal race that the wider world has quietly allowed to become myth, 4th Age heroes that nobody asks about anymore, and whole families that packed their bags and crossed into Mauritania a century ago. Reldo gatekeeps all this knowledge, and he volunteers to unpack it for you, the adventurer, when he is asked. After he gives you all the answers you need, so concisely, so accurately, so thoroughly, he just goes back to his shelf and waits for the next inquiry. This humble librarian is the very intersection between knowledge and power, and he has chosen every single day to be standing at that gate. While Reldo doesn't decide what history is, he definitely can decide what history gets recorded and who gets to hear it. And in a world that has been through as many resets, invasions, and divine catastrophes as Gielinor, and where whole civilizations have been burned off the map and entire races reduced to rumor, he who controls the official record is the person who controls reality. But if Reldo is the institutional man, the one who keeps history filed and properly sorted, then Draenor Village has something far more dangerous. A man who lived it. Dionysius, the wise old man. We've talked about him before, but do you know what's fascinating about the wise old man? He essentially used to be a player character, not in the fourth wall breaking sense, but in terms of what he did. He went on quests and slayed monsters and explored dungeons just like you. He was, by all accounts, the most accomplished adventurer of his generation. And then he just stopped. He retired to Draenor Village, surrounded by the things he'd accumulated over a lifetime of adventure, and just watches. During Recipe for Disaster's subquest to free Sir Amic Vars, the wise old man is the key character with the obscure knowledge needed to obtain a crucial ingredient, the evil chicken's egg. He isn't a sage in the abstract sense. He earned it through his studies of strange beasts, holding specific applied knowledge about this bizarre creature that nobody else seems to have documented so thoroughly. But here's the part that makes me think. Some years ago, the wise old man robbed the Draenor Village bank, rather violently I may add. He used magic to slaughter the guards, walked out with the loot and went back to his house, and nothing ever happened to him. No arrest or trial, pretty much zero consequence. The most powerful kingdom in Misthalin apparently decided that this particular old man in this particular village was simply not worth pursuing. Either they couldn't, or, and I think this one is more interesting reading, they chose not to. What does Dionysius know that keeps him untouchable? What leverage does a retired adventurer have over a crown? Nobody knows. Perhaps Reldo does. So we've established the archivists, the men who sit on information and decide quietly what the world gets to know. However, we must remember that the information stored in a library is only as powerful as its ability to get to the right people. A secret that never leaves a room is just a secret. For knowledge to become power, it has to travel. Which brings me to the most unsettling figure in this entire conversation. His name is Postie Pete. He is a skeleton. More specifically, he is a skull. Well, more specifically, just a skull, a hat, and a mailbag. And he is the sole operator of an intricate postal network which spans the entire known world. His route goes something like this. He turns up to Verrock Palace Library, talking to the mild-mannered librarian Reldo. Then he crosses into the wilderness, one of the most dangerous places in Gielinor, and goes to visit the bandit camp general store and its proprietor. From there, he descends underground to Keldagrim, the dwarven capital, and drops into the Laughing Miner pub, then Castle Wars, then to the Falador party room, then to Ardoin Zoo, then north to Port Fadasmus. And the end of his route, he reaches the summit of Ice Mountain, where he speaks to the Oracle. Let's go over that again. A skeleton postman is moving between the most politically and geographically distinct locations in all of Gielinor. The wilderness doesn't stop him, nor the Mauritanian border. The fact that he has no body doesn't stop him. But how? Well, that's it. That's all the game tells you. He just posts things. But here's the detail that should make you pause. Postie Pete can speak over 1,000 languages. 1,000. That includes Wyvern, the language of skeletal wyverns, ancient creatures that most adventurers only survive long enough to loot. Not only is he delivering mail, but he is also communicating with those he meets at every stop in their native tongue. He is functionally the only entity in Gielinor with the linguistic range to carry messages from every major faction, race, and power structure on the continent. And he does it on a fixed rotating schedule, without fail, without interruption. This is what I keep coming back to though. Every node on Pete's route is, in some way, a seat of power that operates outside of conventional governance. The bandits answer to no crown, and the dwarves of course answer to the consortium, not to any surface king. The Oracle answers to something older than politics, and Port Phasmatis exists in a realm that the living world does not fully control, and they are all, somehow, on Pete's rounds. The Shadow Ruler always needs a humble courier, someone who can move between factions without raising flags, deliver messages at impossible checkpoints, and know every border guard, one that can evade every suspicious eye and know how to communicate and build relationships with the most hard-to-reach people. Because who's going to stop the postman with no body? Who's going to interrogate a cheerful skull with a bag full of letters? Who speaks the language of your people? There is nothing more charming than that. And just one more little fact about Postie Pete is that he has a crafting level of 1, meaning he cannot really build or make anything. But even though he has no body and no real physical skill, he might just be one of the most powerful figures in the game. In a world run by information, the most powerful job isn't just the one who holds it, like our quiet librarian deep within the palace walls of Varrock, but also the one who has access, has connections, and can deliver top secret information without anyone noticing, like Postman Pete, or in this case, a multilingual skull with a hat and a mailbag. There's a shop in Varrock that most players don't really think about all that much. It's called Zaff's Superior Staffs. The man behind the counter is named Zaff, and Zaff sells, well, who would have thought? Staffs. He is not the most exciting guy. He's just Zaff, and he just sells staffs, which is precisely the cover story you'd build if you were running a covert intelligence operation on behalf of the Varrock Crown. Zaff is secretly a member of the Varrock Palace Secret Guard, a covert security unit whose job is to protect King Rold from the Zamorakian threats. He is not your usual guard, dressed like a knight or soldier. He's just a normal, run-of-the-mill shopkeeper. Yet he is strategically positioned at the northwest of the palace square with a clear line of sight to the comings and goings of central Varrock, and this is not an accident. When the kingdom is genuinely at risk, such as when dark forces attempted to place King Rold under mind control spells, you'll notice it isn't the White Knights who stop him. It isn't the usual Varrock guards. It's Zaff. He arrives, teleports the king to safety, permanently seals the threat inside the library, clears every trace of the confrontation, and then he's gone. Varrock none the wiser. Humble old Zaff is actually a highly trained operative who has been hiding an extraordinary level of capability behind a shop counter, waiting for the moment he's needed to serve his king. And then he goes straight back to work, doing what he loves, selling his items. But it's not just Zaff that stands there presenting as a humble merchant. There is another member of the Varrock Palace Secret Guard who doesn't have an office in the palace. He doesn't have a uniform or a title that anyone outside the organization would recognize. He has a broken cart. Rat Burgiss. He stands south of Varrock besides his broken cart, positioned exactly where two major territories meet, Mistalin and Al-Kharid. To most players, he looks like a trader having a bad day, someone you'd walk past on the way to the desert without a second thought. Just a man on a road at a choke point, watching every person who moves between two kingdoms. While we don't know a whole lot about Rat Burgiss, we do know his uncle was a Saradominus priest who told him tales of war when he was just a young boy, including the church's war with the Dagon High, a highly secretive organization whose leader is named Surok. More on that in a moment. But there's something else interesting about Rat Burgiss. Most of the time when you try to talk to him, he'll tell you that he's busy. He has no time to talk. But eventually, he does end up asking something of you. This is when you realize that Rat is not what he seems. He is a member of the Varrock Palace Secret Guard, passing on covert intelligence that might be the difference between peace and war. It turns out the newest leader of the Dagon High, see, I said I'd come back to this, is planning on taking over the kingdom of Mistalin. So Rat and that Zaff guy that I was talking about just earlier worked together to neutralize the threat. All evidence of this threat and the looming conflict completely swept up like it never happened. That's the thing about old school RuneScape. Sometimes the greatest, most history-defining battles happen deep within tunnels, behind closed doors, and among the shadows in a palace library. And afterwards, business goes on as usual, and everyone around you is none the wiser. We have an idea now of the highly sophisticated shadow intelligence apparatus operating within Varrock, but it is not operating purely in isolation, because if we look over at Falador, there's something very similar. In fact, Falador holds one of the most powerful intelligence officers in Gielinor, and he's in plain sight. His name is Sir Tiffy. You'll see him as you walk by, on a park bench, saying phrases like, What ho! He has the manner of someone's retired grandfather who found a nice spot in a park for some air. But in reality, he is the head of recruitment for the Temple Knights, an elite order founded by Saradomin himself, or so they say, whose orders come not from any mortal king, but directly from a god, or so they say. No political shift in Ascania changes those orders from Saradomin. No treaty can bind them, no crown can ever overrule them. You see, there is a story of a dying Temple Knight who crawled out of the God Wars dungeon, the last survivor of an elite unit sent to assess a battle frozen in time for over 2,000 years. The first thing he did wasn't to send for help from the White Knight's castle. He wrote a letter and told the adventurer who found him to get it to Sir Tiffy in Falador Park, freezing to death, and his final act was to route intelligence to an old man on a park bench. That's how much influence Sir Tiffy has. The only types of people who would have this level of hold would be those who make the decisions that are the difference between saving the world or being utterly destroyed. Now, I want to talk about something that, on the surface, sounds a bit like a joke, but I promise you, it isn't. There is a zookeeper at the Ardoin Zoo named Larry, and Larry is convinced that the penguins are up to something. While your first instinct is to scoff and call him mad, you've been in Gielinor long enough to realize that he might just be right. The Killer Gentoo Penguin Organization, the KGP, has had an operative embedded in the Ardoin Zoo penguin enclosure for well over a year, codenamed Pop. Standing completely still among the other penguins, filing intelligence reports, waiting for extraction back to the motherland. There is a spy ring of penguin comrades in a pen at a public zoo, in one of the most visited cities in Kandarin, and the only human being in all of Gielinor who noticed was a zookeeper that everyone around him had assumed had lost his mind. And the KGP's brilliant operation doesn't stop at the zoo. During the same period, 2 penguin operatives infiltrated a sheep pen in Lumbridge, disguised as a sheep, to gather intelligence on Fred the farmer. They operate at the highest level, take on the most impossible missions, and work for no one but themselves and their beloved motherland. The KGP also has a war room and an agility training facility, a command structure that uses codenames and emote-based authentication sequences, highly sophisticated techniques you'd of course only expect from penguins at the zoo. I'm not joking, penguins have a better intelligence apparatus than most of the human kingdoms in this game. And not only that, they were able to build it undetected, while everyone on the surface assumed they were just cute, cuddly penguins. The only thing standing between Gielinor and whatever the KGP are planning is Larry, the zookeeper. And he doesn't mind being laughed at or being called a madman because he knows that it is God's honest truth that these penguins are up to something, dare I say fishy. While we still don't know how they play into the bigger picture of Gielinor, or how large or sophisticated their network is, it just goes to show this game has many powerful players in bizarre places. Ones that make the rules, move the dial and the chess pieces, all under everyone's nose, or rather, beak. But I want to end this section with one that genuinely keeps me up at night, because everything we've talked about so far, the Secret Guard, the Temple Knights, the Penguins, they all have a structure, a chain of command, a reason for existing that you can, if you dig hard enough, eventually trace. Yuri Molotov has none of that. Yuri Molotov is the man who delivers the next stage of a treasure trail. To summon him, you have to be standing in a very specific location, wearing a specific combination of items, performing a very specific emote. When all of those conditions are met, he appears, hands you the next clue, and then says something completely incomprehensible before disappearing. The phrases Yuri uses have been documented. They actually resemble real-world spy codes, the kind historically used to pass concealed information between agents in plain language. Things that mean nothing to anyone listening, but everything to the person they're intended for. And the player character's response every single time, without fail, is simply, "What?" Which is exactly what you'd say if you were receiving intelligence you weren't cleared for. If you were being used as an unwitting courier in an operation you had no knowledge of, performing the right actions in the right place in the right order, and handing off something valuable without ever understanding what it was. Yuri appears to be wearing a ham shirt. That's Humans Against Monsters. It's an organization that's highly unethical. Whether he's actually affiliated affiliated with them or not, the wiki won't confirm. It lists it as unknown. He has a briefcase, he won't tell you what's in it. He speaks in codes you don't understand, collects something from you and vanishes. And on the harder clue scrolls, before he'll appear at all, you'll have to kill a double agent, an identical copy of Yuri, who shows up trying to intercept the handoff. Something is trying to stop Yuri's deliveries. Something knows what he's carrying, and they keep sending an agent who looks exactly like him to intercept it. Every single clue scroll you've ever completed, you still to this day don't know what it all means. There are some things best left unknown. The deeper you peel back the layers, the more you realize how many are quietly pulling the strings in the background. Does Yuri work with the penguins? Is he too from the motherland? What is Yuri's goal? And what on earth has he been trying to communicate? All deep covert operations need their patsy, their unwitting courier, their assets. And I often think you might be better off not knowing what you were truly a part of. Alcarid is a city on the edge of two worlds. To the north, Misthalin, Varrock, the political center of the human continent. To the south, the Caridian Desert, one of the most hostile and least understood regions in all of Gielinor, full of ancient pyramids and lost cities, with treasures buried in the sands that were old when the gods were young. Right there, standing at that intersection behind a market stall so unremarkable you've almost certainly walked straight past it, is a man who's quietly built one of the most far-reaching commercial empires in the game. His name is Ali Morrisane. He is, by his own description, the greatest merchant in all of Gielinor. He is not boasting about it. By all accounts, he might truly be the greatest merchant in all of Gielinor. Ali Morrisane is the owner and namesake of Ali Morrisane Commercial Enterprises, a company engaging in a variety of activities and the brain behind the Magic Carpet fleet operating across the Caridian Desert. So you get the full picture, I need to emphasize the fact that this is not a small trading operation. This is a whole entire company with a board and employees as well as commercial interests that span an entire desert region. But with all that behind it, the public face of all of it is a man behind a modest stall in Alcarid, selling you junk you didn't ask for and somehow is making a profit. Let's talk about how he really operates. Ali Morrisane doesn't run his empire by working harder than everyone else. No matter what he might say, he runs it by making everyone else work for him, whether they agreed to or not. See, after having an adventurer settle a gang feud between bandits and Menophites in his hometown of Polvanich, he invited a number of acquaintances to Alcarid to set up his business. But in reality, this farmer, tailor, smith, and guard, all named Ali, well, they were there to threaten every shopkeeper in Alcarid. Anyone who offers services or goods for payments is approached and told to join Ali's chain of business or have theirs taken down. A fancy way of putting this is that he runs a highly organized extortion ring, sort of like he's just another mafia boss. Operating in broad daylight and in a city with a functioning government, the shopkeepers of Alcarid continue to live their lives, knowing that Chancellor Hassan has put Spymaster Osman and the elite guard on it. So the most senior intelligence operative in Alcarid, Spymaster Osman, a man who runs his own network of covert assets, is actively investigating Ali Morrisane, and Ali is still standing at that very stall. Osman hasn't stopped him, which means either Ali is too careful to catch or too valuable to remove, or, and I think this is more interesting, both. Now, let's look at the actual reach of what he's built through the rogue trader network, because this is where the scale of it becomes genuinely startling. Ali's shop sells runes supplied by Aubrey in Varrock, unique clothing including Menophyte robes and desert outfits supplied from Sophanim, and blackjacks, which are weapons associated with desert criminal enterprises. Map those supply lines once more. Aubrey is the rune shop owner in Varrock, the capital of Misthalin. Sophanim is a city that at the time these deals are being struck is sealed off from the outside world by quarantine. The Blackjacks come from Polvanich, a lawless desert town where two criminal gangs were actively at war. Ali Morrisane has active supply chains running simultaneously into a sealed holy city, a foreign kingdom capital, and a gangland settlement in the middle of the desert. And he didn't negotiate those deals himself. He sent you as his personal procurement agent across multiple political borders to active conflict zones and the genius of it is that by the time you understand what you were actually doing, the deals were already done. Your character realizes at the end of the feud that the entire quest was designed so that you would buy a desert disguise from Ali before you left, proving that Ali Morrisane is in fact the greatest merchant in all of Gielinor. As much as he is a cunning strategist with vast amounts of commercial and political power across the land, he in the end turned a quest to procure deals across borders into a simple sales transaction. You were the product and the customer simultaneously, and you didn't even notice until it was over. But the commercial manipulation is almost the least interesting thing about him. In that time, Ali was busy building his supply network and leaning on Al-Kharid's shopkeepers. Something else was happening, something quieter right beneath everyone's noses. Ali Morrisane has been hiring people to steal artifacts from the Uza Mastaba. The skeletons of those workers are still inside, with the crates they were packing labeled for delivery to Ali Morrisane commercial enterprises. These artifacts scattered across the land, buried beneath the sand, are the physical remnants of a culture that most of Gielinor has forgotten existed. And Ali Morrisane has been quietly looting it, sending workers in who, based on the evidence available to us, didn't come back, shipping whatever they found to a company registered in his name. Oh, and a few more things, just so the full picture is visible. Ali is implied to own the mansion used during the Ratcatcher's quest. He has a son, Farid, embedded at the Grand Exchange in Baroque, and according to Postbag from the Hedge, he once sold Crandor's Lesser Demons a one-way ticket to that very island. Without them knowing, there was almost certainly no return, which one can assume means Ali Morrisane has operational history on an island that nobody visits. All of this knowledge and political and commercial sway as he stands there at his market stall in Al-Kharid. Let's put the whole picture on the table. A librarian who decided what the world is allowed to remember. A retired adventurer who robbed a bank and the crown never came for him. A sentient skull moving correspondence between the wilderness, Mauritania, and the summit of a mountain in over 1,000 languages without ever being stopped. A staff salesman who is secretly one of the most capable battle mages in Mistalun. His comrade runs state intelligence from a broken cart. A man on a park bench who receives field reports from operatives dying in the wilderness, because when everything goes wrong out there, he's who you write to. Some pretty sus penguins. And in Al-Kharid, behind a market stall, a man with goons and buried workers, supply lines through sealed cities, and documented history on an island nobody visits. The lore in old school RuneScape is built on gods and wars and world-ending threats, and this is what we mostly focus on, the surface level wars and their heroes. And all of that is a really intricate and fascinating part of the game. But the mistake is assuming that the most important power structures in Gielinor announce themselves. While you were grinding, they were meeting. While you were dying to the same boss mechanic for the 47th time, codes were moving between stalls and cities. Intelligence was being filed deep away in an unsuspecting palace library, and artifacts were being crated up in desert ruins and shipped to companies that shouldn't exist. They were there the day you made your account, in the background, secretly calling the shots and the direction of history, and you aided them in ways you will never know. How deep does this all go? Is this all connected? And how many strings are being pulled, secret letters being passed, negotiations that are happening right under your nose? The deep state, the shadow government of Gielinor, doesn't need you to believe in it. It just needs you to keep looking the other way. So next time you log in, before you open the bank, before you check your Slayer task, walk through a town, look at the NPCs you've ignored for years, the underdogs, the friendly nondescript townfolk. Ask yourself why that person is standing in that exact spot. Who have they been in contact with, and what are they up to? Because I don't think we've found all of them yet, so keep your eyes peeled. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed, and let me know which character you think I missed. My wife told me that the milkmaid looks pretty sus, and I kind of agree. I'll be back next week with another video. Bye.